Love you.
Yo, they wrote on the statue.
You stand with genocide!
Fucking coward!
You stand with genocide!
As an American patriot, I am greatly disturbed by the events we have seen in our country in the wake of the October 7th massacre in Israel, where literally pro-Palestinian protest and widespread anti-Jewish sentiment, and even beyond that, widespread anti-Americanism have swept the entire country and have created, in my opinion, the perfect storm caused by our acceptance as a culture of multiculturalism. We have seen, for instance, Jewish stores in New York City getting attacked by pro-Palestinian protest. Store owners who, by the way, have nothing to do with the conflict, regardless of what you think of the conflict, have absolutely nothing to do with the conflict, getting attacked by radicals who translate the entire world and their narrow political vision and see everything as a struggle for conflict, for power, for intifada, as the protesters say, or for jihad. And we have Jewish students getting castigated in university classes by professors that are calling them colonizers and oppressors. And most odiously and most offensively to me, all that stuff is offensive and is bad. But what really, really struck me when I was already on the edge about that other stuff was when I saw in front of the White House, the people's house that has stood for hundreds of years, that even withstood the British in the War of 1812, that symbol of American republicanism, I saw protesters outside the gate hoisting pro-Palestinian flags into the gate, trying to climb on top of the gate, and shouting, Allahu Akbar.
Allahu Akbar! 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 Allahu Akbar!
And then these same protesters went ahead and desecrated several monuments to the uncommon and great men of America. Ben Franklin, General Lafayette, so on and so forth. They did so by putting regalia and putting graffiti all over them to desecrate their name, to cheering, roaring applause. And there were even signs of that same protest that said, from Palestine to Mexico, there should be no borders. To roaring applause. And when I discuss this issue, I'm oftentimes accused of being xenophobic. I'm oftentimes accused of losing my values that I still have, by the way. I'm oftentimes accused of a lot of things. Nothing in this video should be construed as an attack on people, but it should absolutely be construed as an attack on ideas, especially those ideas that the American people have prostrated themselves to at the behest of their politicians, at the behest of captured cultural and social institutions, in order to be benevolent and accepting. Sometimes benevolence can cause the death of a society because not every idea comports with benevolence. Some ideas only know force and need to be stopped by force. How can we get to a point in America where so many of us are okay, or not even okay, apathetic with the cultural degradation and rot we are seeing just in the past few weeks, not to mention in the past few months, or the past few years, or the past decade that we have seen since the rise of this postmodernist leftist worldview that has driven a lot of our institutions into the ground? How can we be so comfortable? I'll tell you. Part of it is that so many Americans are under the spell of multiculturalism. And let me be very clear about what I mean by multiculturalism. Multiculturalism is this vain philosophy that says, in no uncertain terms, that every single culture in the world, especially the minority culture, has equal value, and that their value should be respected And here's what multiculturalism goes on to say, because that's what most people will just say, okay, well, not all cultures are equal, which is correct. But multiculturalism continues that claim into an even more dangerous point, where it says that when the minority culture comes into a country where the dominant culture exists, the dominant culture attempting to make the minority culture assimilate into their image is oppressive. And therefore, multiculturalism becomes a struggle between the minority culture and their values and the dominant culture. And the ultimate goal of multiculturalism is indeed to usurp the dominant culture and to allow the minority culture to set forth its values in the world in its relativistic frame. That is really what multiculturalism is. And any advocate of multiculturalism will likely tell you this is the case, that they embrace cultural relativism as a means of beating out the oppressive dominant forces that reign supreme in those particular societies. But the problem with this worldview is very simple. It's that not all cultures are based on sheer force of will. Not all cultures are based on sheer material rising, materialistic viewpoints that view everyone in terms of classes and in terms of groups, as opposed to viewing them as spiritual entities realized as individuals. Not all cultures believe in that. In the sense of American culture, our country is based on fundamental universal values that transcend the group, that transcend status, that transcend any inferior material designation, and go deeper to the soul of what makes us human beings. And it is through that truth that we establish a standard for every single person who comes in this country to assimilate to that grand vision. And guess what? The American political experiment, the American Republican project, is the best project if you want to assimilate into a different country. If you go to other countries and try to assimilate, this may have been true 30 years ago, maybe not now, you will have been expected to take up more than just their ideas. You would have been expected to conform your whole self to the image of that nation. Think about the UK. The UK is centered around the monarchy, the Queen, the King. That's their image. Now, of course, not all countries in the UK follow that neatly, but still, especially now that they're letting mass migration come in and just ruin it. But still, that's a different story, different day. But in America, your actions only need to be oriented towards the universal right that all of us are bound by as human beings. Therefore, you can have Chinatowns, you can have little Italys, you can have little Mexicos, you can have all these different diverse places in America that still go under the same umbrella of values. But America is a new world phenomenon. And old world values don't comport with new world norms. America is a departure from the history of the world, because up until 1776, you would be very hard-pressed to find a single country that said that we believe the individual has dignity, and we believe in universal morality, and we believe that the individual's rights should be protected. Up until America, that was not a political reality. There were small bursts of that sentiment that happened, but all those bursts ultimately led up to the formation of America. And yet that old world system said that status matters. And the truth is, Americanism is not just a citizen designation on a sheet. It's a philosophy. It's a philosophy that prides the reason of the individual as a value. It's a philosophy that prides the primacy of the individual as a value in political considerations. It's a philosophy that prides the importance of natural law to political decision making. It's a philosophy that values consent of the governed, that values free speech, that values a free conscience and a free spirit, not a free spirit that just pursues hedonism, but a free spirit that pursues virtue and pursues the right and pursues things that help you understand the world. Americanism fundamentally values all of those things, and yet radical Islam hates every single thing I just mentioned. And radical Islam is a product of the old world. It's a product of the old world that classifies people solely in relation to their group status as conceived by a theocratic sentiment that I would say errs theologically, but still, different video, different day. It's an old world viewpoint that says that God's mercy is reflected through jihad, through force, through a carnal and material phenomenon, and not through the higher values as human beings that we possess like love and goodwill, which are spiritual phenomena. But Islam says, no, jihad is how you reflect God's will upon this world. Radical Islam says that certain individuals, by virtue of their nature as human beings, should have certain statuses and should have certain conditions in society. This is why in many Arab countries you see women having to wear veils over their face. You see women not being able to drive. Until recently, women couldn't drive in Saudi Arabia. This is why. It's not because of some radical interpretation. It's because of the mainline views of Islam. In radical Islam, there is no respect for the individual's rights outside of the narrow religious conception of that philosophy and that faith. In radical Islam, the fatwa, the issuing of death over opinions. Look at Salman Rushdie, the author who was critical of Islam in a peaceful way, writing a book. The Ayatollah of Iran issued a death order against him, to which the entire Arab world celebrated and cheered for. What happened to love thy enemies? What happened to mercy and goodwill and grace? Islam rejects all of that. And yet there are so many people that think this philosophy can comport with the philosophy of Americanism and the philosophy of the West as a whole, that generally trend in a different ideological orientation than radical Islam. And this is the problem. Multiculturalism is the only force that can say you can reconcile a new world norm with an old world value. It's the only force that can make two mutually exclusive concepts somehow sink in tandem. But they don't sink in tandem towards the good. They sink in tandem towards ultimate and utter conflict in which the lower side usurps the upper side. Multiculturalism is the only concept that can weaken an individual's reason to the extent that they are willing to accept mutually contradictory opinions and be philosophically and intellectually inert and inconsistent for some broader emotional sake of being benevolent. Multiculturalism is a failed experiment. And as you see these pictures on your screen of American cities being overrun by these old world zealots, as you see these pictures on your screen of American people being accosted by these old world zealots, as you see the pictures on your screen of the American Capitol being overrun and desecrated by these old world zealots, you have to really ask yourself a question. How much longer are we going to hide behind the label of acceptance and universal benevolence in order to enable our own destruction? How much longer are we going to believe the false idea conferred upon the minds of Americans by academia, by left-wing, progressive, conflict-based, status-based academia, old world academia, that Americanism is this universalist ethic that applies to every culture everywhere, which takes a half-truth and then exchanges it for an error? The half-truth that America is a universalist idea in which values matter more than anything else. But the other truth is that not all values comport with Americanism. And those that do not comport with Americanism do not at all deserve to belong in America. Again, this is some radical stuff. This is some scary stuff. But you tell me this. If Americanism is a philosophy, and being an American is a product of that philosophy, then how in the world can you allow people who hate your country, who hate others in that country because of their identity, who hate others in the country because of their so-called oppressor status or whatever, how can you allow them to remain in that country when their very existence is in defiance of the philosophy your country is based upon? Not only do you contradict the ethic of the country by doing that, you, like a building being removed from its foundations, ultimately set our nation on a pathway of destruction by coddling and prostrating yourself towards untruths that contradict the values of this nation. Once again, my friends, this is going to be a time of soul searching for America. This is going to be a time of contemplation and reflection towards America. But it is my belief that these progressive philosophies have inflicted a wound so severe on the heart of the American mind and the heart of the American people that we are now just finally seeing the blood ooze out and rear its ugly head. We need to get back to a values-based, philosophy-based, rigorous conception of Americanism, and we need to enforce that in how we deal with ideologies that hate our country, that hate the new world, that hate the individual, that hate the spiritual value of man, that hate reason, that hate our idea of natural law, that hate everything, that hate consent. We need to have a values-based approach to those ideas that will weaken and perhaps even get rid of their impact in this nation. Because if what you have seen in this video continues to happen, I'm sorry to report, I don't think there will be an American nation in the same way it has been conceived of for the past few hundred years. I don't think it will exist. And I don't think there's another place in this world that is the biggest defender of the free world, biggest defender of the new world than this country. Let me say one more thing before I go. Nothing in this video should be construed as me supporting one side or the other of the Israel-Palestine conflict, although my heart goes to the Jewish people, and my heart is absolutely with anyone who is targeted for their identity. Nothing in this video should be construed as a call for war. At the heart of my philosophy, I am anti-war, and I believe the military-industrial complex is a very toxic force in American politics. But this video should be construed as a salvo against the old world ideas that march across American cities right now and seek for our utter destruction and seek to reconstruct us in the image of something that deviates from the essence of what it means to be an American. My friends, I love you guys so much. Like this video, comment on this video, share this video, subscribe to this channel. Be sure to donate to me if you want to help me. All my links are down in the comment section down below. Study philosophy, my friends. Study history. And most importantly, please, 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 stay pensive. Bye, everyone.